Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 44 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdowns show. This is our final show for the year, and as such, we wanted to give our listeners a little gift, a massive 15-weapon breakdown. My name is Impetus, and I am joined as always by my co-hosts, Saint Kabir and Court. Saint, who do we have to thank today?
I want to take just a second to shout out a Guardian by the name of Dredgen Gibbon, who I ran into in the LFG this week, just running some dungeons. He mentioned that PvE had really helped him kind of get into the real in-game of the game and even clear his first GMs, which I love to hear. That's why we do it each and every week, helping spread information, strategies, knowledge about the game to help you take on bigger challenges. So love to hear that. It's a great encouragement. As a reminder, you can leave us all kinds of feedback. You can connect to us via our socials, the Destiny Massive Breakdown Discord server, leaving reviews for the show, positive, critical, constructive, help guide the trajectory of the show, episodes that we create, topics we cover, all that kinds of stuff. Also want to give a shout out to everybody that supports the show via Patreon. We wouldn't be able to do this every week. Destiny Massive Breakdowns, PvE, happen because of you guys. So if you are a supporter of the show, know that you are greatly appreciated. Court, what are we talking about this week?
Hello, Saint and Impetus. Hope you guys are well. And yes, we are approaching the end of the year here. We have a massive chunker of an episode, as per usual. But that is our gift to our lovely listeners and community. For this week's episode, we are just doing a quick highlight of the Bungie interview on Firing Range. We have 3 separate breakdowns, which will split things up with some timestamps in the description. First off will be the Dawning Weapons, which we have 5 of, the Season 19 Seraph Weapons, which we have 6, and the IKELOS Weapons, which we have 4. Timestamps in the description if you want to swap between various sections. This is also the section where we'll talk about some housekeeping and just sort of podcast updates. So, very recently, supposed to be the 3 of us were going to be on Destiny Digest with Dan Finity, but Saint and I, we had to step away just because of scheduling conflicts. So Impetus was flying the flag for our podcast, but due to a recording error, Impetus' interview with Dan Finity, Revenant, and Gothfem was lost. No fault between anyone, really. Just one of those things when it comes to recording episodes. Touch wood, we haven't had any of those issues, but we will be putting some things for the new year. We don't have any specific dates for a follow-up, but we will, of course, be back on the 3 of us with Dan Finity and Destiny Digest sometime in the future. Speaking of incorrections, we had last week we were talking about the Dawning Surprise origin trait. Now, obviously, this was just before the Dawning launched. We were under the impression that the effects would provide a literal Dawning present, i.e. one that you'd open up and you'd get a random weapon. That's like a way you could get these weapons post-Dawning event. This is not the case, and the action that actually gives you the benefits are as follows. So accumulate what kills with the Dawning weapon. After reaching a particular threshold, which we're still to confirm, it spawns a Dawning gift in the world space. This Dawning gift is a small cube engram that you can pick up. And picking it up is around about 10% energy to each ability, a burst of healing, and it starts health regen. We'll talk about that as well in the Dawning section in a moment. Finally, this is where we talk about our kind of what we've been doing in Destiny. I'll kick things off and say lots of heists. I've been having a ton of fun. I don't have a lot of playtime coming up, so I did manage to get my Star Baker title, and I have guiltied it just because just get all those cookies baked. And finally, for me anyway, perhaps the highlight of last week's hotfix, Jabalkin's Hauberk is now giving me volatile rounds on my void weapons, and it's a ton of fun. Been comboing with Wave Splitter, Graviton Lance, Collective Obligation, Deathbringer, Heart Shadow, and a bunch of legendary void weapons. I think my favourite right now is the Graviton Lance, just because there's a metric shit ton of void particles everywhere in the play space, and it's a lot of fun. And I feel like this may break the game. Impetus, what have you been up to?
I have also been doing heists, been doing Dawning, been doing Gambit. That was our double XP playlist this past week, so getting that rep. And did Deep Stone Crypt run. I'm now 2 for 4 on red border posterities that I've had to buy. Still have yet to get a single red border to drop naturally from that raid. That raid will be in the rotator for this upcoming week. So if you have the time and you can find 5 other people, go and pick your particular what are they called? The different sections of a raid. Gosh, I'm blanking out.
Encounters?
Encounters, thank you. I knew it was an E word. The encounters, look up a loot table so you know which weapons drop from which encounter and farm to your heart's content. Hopefully you get some red borders for those craftable options. And yeah, been a lot of fun. Hard to do my Dawning bounties when there are void hunters running around stealing all my kills with their void everything, and all the particles are making my computer struggle to keep up. But you know what? I'm so happy for you guys. So happy for you guys. Sam, what have you been doing?
Yeah, a lot of Spire, the Watcher, a lot of Deep Zone. No cowboy hat, but I got a pretty good Wilder fight that's got auto-loading and Frenzy with blinding, so that's pretty good. We'll talk more about those weapons soon, I'm sure. Also managed to snag a Heritage with Focused Fury, which is just super good for slug DPS. So I think I got 1 red border, so slightly better luck. Not great, slightly better in the 6 clears so far, or whatever it is. Definitely going to be farming Tanix for that double loot on the challenge, which is just 4 bomb, which is such an easy challenge to run in that raid. So looking forward to farming that a lot next week. We'll also be baking cookies vigorously inside Destiny and out, honestly, over the next week. You know, Christmas is coming near, going to be giving out a lot of gingerbread men, etc. And some great Dawning weapons to chase that we're going to be taking a look at here in just a second. But first, we got another interview to talk about. They've been hitting the road, and we got some insights from Chris and Merc on episode 56 of The Firing Range. There's a lot of talk about aerial effectiveness, but there were some highlights that we still definitely want to hit on. Court, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, so they talked about origin traits again. I know they did speak about, Chris and Vivian spoke about origin traits on our podcast a few episodes ago. Essentially, the points here where weapons are built around their origin traits, so there's a lot of room for theming for activities. It's easier to test since they have less weapons to test on, and team are pretty happy, super happy with origin traits overall, though they think some may have overcrept other perks. But again, they don't necessarily have a huge concern, as origin traits can only roll on, 6 weapons at a maximum, and they like having distinctive weapons. And yeah, I think origin traits are in a really good spot, personally, from my perspective, as we've spoke about before. And we've got, the 3 new ones to talk about this week as well.
Yes, we do. There was another question regarding a void perk like incandescent or volatile rounds. Somebody wanted to know if we can look forward to that in the future. And yes, they did confirm they are looking at an aggressive damage perk for Void 3.0 synergy in the future, but no other time frame was given. So very excited. I'm sure our Falcons hunters are going to be just tearing up the servers once that perk drops. So that'll be great.
What is a frame rate, honestly?
Yeah.
They talked briefly about Hawkmoon and DMT. This is something that's come up a little bit in the past. I think we even talked about this briefly, but they said they're not going to do any more random rolled exotics, but are definitely interested in more craftable exotics. The random roll thing honestly just made the most sense for Hawkmoon, and it does, now looking back, it does seem a bit strange to have DMT with the random rolls, and I think that, kind of looking at the system, they definitely want to give that more curated experience, as is tradition with the exotics going forward. outside of some crafting exceptions. They also said that Hawkmoon and DMT will be craftable at some point in the future. No exact date on that given, but that is coming, which is interesting.
Yeah, we did get some insight to future exotic buffs, and I think the idea was that some of this will be put onto existing, or they'll be added to catalysts added onto the weapon, which will be dipping into subclass 3.0 verbs. So the following exotics will be getting subclass synergy at Lightfall: the Queensbreaker, 1000 Voices, Polaris Lance, Prometheus Lens, Sunshot, Leviathan's Breath, Ruinous Effigy, Two-tailed fox, and a few that they wanted to keep secret as well.
Man, that Sunshot
Interesting.
is that's nice. I mean, I started using that because I wanted to ensure that I could generate myself more heavy ammo when we were doing like some low man stuff. And if that got Scorch, I think that'd be pretty hot.
Yeah. So just looking at that list of the named ones, Queensbreaker, 1000 Voices, Two-Tailed Fox don't have catalysts currently, if I recall. So could be interesting.
Polaris Lance is something that's been sitting in the back for a while too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll point out as well that Prometheus Lens and Two-Tailed Fox already have some synergy just now.
Yep.
Prometheus Lens has the Scorch on damage application. And Two-Tailed Fox has the at least the Void Rocket suppresses, and it's a true suppression as well. The Solar Rocket is an old burn; it's not a Scorch one.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So something else that is maybe fantastic, depending on how you look at it, we got a little bit more information about the heavy weapons rebalancing that's coming up. No hard details other than a few cases here. So really what this all centers around is LFRs and how they are the most meta option across most situations in the game right now. So we did get confirmation that LFRs are getting their damage potential knocked down to give some other heavies some chance and breathing room. And then they also did follow up on Whisper of the Worm, as that kind of came to the forefront with the AE change that came to a lot of the exotic weapons. What they said was the weapons team believes that Whisper of the Worm is currently pretty strong in terms of damage potential, but is outmatched by all LFRs. Hence the reason why that group of weapons is getting looked at. So again, kind of hard to comment on this. We don't know what the details are going to be in Lightfall, but we do now know that LFRs will not be at the level that they currently are, which, I'm not saying I'm excited for that, but it definitely does need to happen. They are quite strong now, and we are going to be talking about an LFR that is very, very strong. So excited to hear about that. Excited to see what other heavy weapons come to the forefront. How about yourselves, Court and Saint?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while that linears have kind of been at the top, and they had the requirements, and now we're seeing some other things like the divinity was nerfed down a little bit, so now maybe there's a little bit more of investment to making sure that you're not just getting the maximum amount of buff and debuff by putting the div bubble on and then just spraying at it. I definitely think that some of the shorter damage phases and harder to hit, like the new dungeon boss is designed against working with linear fusion rifles, right? It's it moves around a lot and the crit is hard to hit, and you're probably not going to be using divinity. And I think that was intentional, so some of that is the boss design, but yeah, I definitely am happy to see that get shaken up just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, how long have we had LFRs as the kings and queens of the DPS meta? I mean, years at this
Season
point.
of the Lost, full year.
Man.
Yeah, it's I think it's high time that we got a little kind of revamp, kind of overhaul to our damage application. Again, as us three, we're not advocating for LFRs to be completely trash, because they are really only good at precision damage. They falter when you try and do body shots. They're not good at all at body shots, but I think they've just been over and above all other damage potential weapons, including rockets. Rockets did have a little bit of a resurgence, then they've been knocked back down just with the introduction of the aggressive frame for LFRs. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's always nice to get an overhaul to our damage potential, and be interesting to see what comes out top in Lightfall.
Yeah, we don't need them destroyed. We just need them nerfed down just enough so that Xenophage has higher total damage output, and then we'll be
yes, of course. How could we forget?
Yep.
Prometheus.
Eyes on the prize.
I just want to mention real quick is I remember seeing that Solo 3.0 integration back in season 17, and then going and using it and just feeling like it fell flat a little bit because of the way the scorch stacks would go over time, but I wasn't usually, it was taking too long for me to get to 100 scorch stacks to ignite a target. They're usually dying first. So it limited the amount of time that felt like it was having an impact. So I'm really looking forward to where that lands and how that kind of competes with Sunshot, in terms of those super good solar ad clear weapons.
The one, at this point now, the only exotic trace rifle that doesn't have some big gimmick like Divinity or has interaction with their subclass verbs is Ruinous Effigy. Yeah, it's got a big gimmick with the whole you collapse an enemy into an orb and you use that as a way of damaging or defense. But I'd be very curious what they plan to do for Ruinous Effigy, because that is one of my little kind of sleeper favorite weapons. It exists, and I want to use more of it because it looks amazing, especially one of the ornaments.
You want a reason to use it, right?
Yeah. So I think the whole orb mechanic will have some you apply suppression or volatility. Is my bet here. I'm not betting any god rolls here. This is just a casual bet.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, very excited. That's going to be so much fun. We're going to have our hands full come Lightfall. A bunch of new legendary weapons to go craft, and then a bunch of exotics to play with, and whatever else is coming very rapidly, actually. So let's take this time to jump into our first batch of weapons here. We're going to start with the Dawning. Again, this is going to be the last episode of the year, so we want to make sure that we give our thoughts on these weapons, because when we come back, Dawning will not be around. So there are 5 of them. We've already touched on what the origin trait does, Dawning Surprise. That is defeating targets rapidly awards a Dawning gift, but not that kind of Dawning gift. It's a little cube on the ground, and when you pick it up, you are getting around about 10% energy to each ability. Get some health back, and you also get health regeneration. This is a very good PvE origin trait, especially just when you're out clearing ads, which is the best way to get this. So I'm thinking of primary weapons with large magazines. When it takes more bullets to kill enemies at those higher difficulties. We do have a machine gun in this weapon group. That's going to be really great since a machine gun excels at ad clear. Really, you want to be thinking about weapons that can kill enemies instantly that aren't for single targets, because we want to make sure that we're hitting that kill threshold quickly so that we can get the gift to spawn. So definitely take a look at these weapons, see what jumps out to you. This origin trait does have its uses in PvE for sure. I'll start us off with the oldest Dawning weapon. This is Cold Front, our kinetic aggressive frame, 750 RPM. I guess the one final thing I'll mention here for all of the Dawning weapons, they are not craftable. You do need to play the Dawning event to unlock them. You can purchase rolls of these weapons and then also get the opportunity for extra perks in columns 3 and 4 from Eva Levante. So this is meant to be a limited time event. There is FOMO here. Get to it. Go bake those cookies. Go get lucky with these weapons. So Cold Front, kinetic aggressive frame, SMG, that is frame bonus of high damage and high recoil. This season, Bungie has, or the weapons team, I should say, has started experimenting. We have extra origin traits on some of these weapons here. So we've got the Dawning Surprise, and we also have Hake Breach armaments on Cold Front. That is the increased damage against vehicles, turrets, barricades, and stasis crystals. I would do a proper breakdown of all of those different types and what that means, but we just don't have time to get into that. I know Court, of course, has this all on his spreadsheet, so you're welcome to go look at the details if you are interested. But yes, you can swap between Dawning Surprise and Hake Breach armaments on Cold Front. This is one of two non-sunset aggressive kinetic SMGs. The other one is Extraordinary Rendition from Season of the Chosen. That is statistically better in all categories except airborne effectiveness over Cold Front. This is not a perk monster, a stat monster by any means. Debatably not a perk monster, but just important. So if you are a fan of Extraordinary Rendition, you still use yours if you have one. I would probably tell you to keep using it. I doubt that Cold Front can really compete unless you are a fan of the origin traits. We'll jump into barrels and magazines real quick here. We got low stability here on Cold Front, so for my controller players, I'd probably start looking at that stat, getting that number up a little bit higher, right up to where you are comfortable. We do have a few perks in column 3 that can help with stability, but again, if you want all the help you can get, we've got polygonal rifling for that plus 10 to stability. That takes you up to 17. You could also do fluted barrel. That's going to give you more handling than stability. Small bore gives you a little bump to the range and stability. For M&K players, you can probably lean all the way into range if you really want to. I'd maybe go to full bore. That's going to take stability all the way down to 0, but again, that does get that range up pretty high, which can be nice. On the magazine side of things, flared magwell, faster reload, a little bit of stability, or you could go tac mag. I think those are going to be great options. Appended mag if you really want a few more bullets there. And then looking in column 3 here, we've got a few good options. So again, for controller players, if you're really struggling with the stability, we do have tap the trigger in column 3. That can definitely help out there if you want. We've also got perpetual motion and stats for all as well. Those provide multiple statistical benefits, but again, stability is included in those. Subsistence is kind of the last PvE perk there in column 3. Well, unrelenting as well if you like having extra health as well. But again, with Dawning Surprise as the origin trait, I think unrelenting is a little bit lessened unless I really, really need to get as much health as possible. I don't think I would need to stack. I'd probably rather just go with the origin trait for health regen specifically. So moving on to column 4, got a few interesting damage perks here. Rampage, One for All, Frenzy. You could go with Cascade Point here, Final Blows, or Sustained Precision Hits with another weapon. Increase this weapon's rate of fire for a short duration. We are still working on the exact numbers for what the RPM increase is, as well as the duration. So remains to be seen. I think this is probably going to work out on a harder hitting weapon, though. Generally, I'm probably not worried about this on my primary weapon, especially when it's competing with something like One for All or Frenzy. So again, when we start thinking about combos here across columns 3 and 4, you do have that stats for all, One for All combo. That's a tried and true, definitely very strong on any weapon. So that will be a recommendation there. If you want to have a bit more of a run and gun play style, Perpetual Motion, of course, is going to be fantastic. You can pair that with Frenzy, really get the handling up and your reload speed just from Frenzy, and then also from Perpetual Motion as well, the handling and reload there. It's up to you. There's also, the classic Subsistence Rampage, if that's what you're interested in as well. I think you've got plenty of options. Again, this isn't much of a shocking need to have incredible SMG. I do think Extraordinary Rendition is probably a little bit better. We also have some non-aggressive frame SMGs as well that are quite popular. Submission is the one that I use personally. That drops from Val the Disciple. I think that's an excellent kinetic SMG. So I wouldn't probably point you to this weapon first, but the upcoming weapon that Court's about to talk about is very interesting as well. Court, what do you have to say about our newest Dawning weapon?
Yeah, it's Stay Frosty, which is, this year's 2022's new Dawning weapon. It is the Stasis Lightweight frame, and it's a pulse rifle, so it's 450. The frame bonus, superb handling, so you've got that intrinsic handling bonus, plus you also move faster while equipped. That is a passive plus 20 mobility and a 6.25% forward movement speed bonus. To put that in perspective, that's half the speed bonus of the Arc speed booster, which is 12.5% and is the cap. So you can't stack each other, but just to give you that kind of perspective as to where that lies in terms of the speed bonus you get. This is another one that gets an additional origin trait that you can swap to. It is Omolon Fluid Dynamics, so the top half of the magazine has up to 20 stability and 30 reload speed, decreased as the magazine gets lower and disappears at 50%. So you only have that bonus at the initial 50% of the top half of the magazine. In terms of, comparing it with its archetype peers, there's not really any, at least in the stasis slot. This closest competitor would be Chattering Bone, but even that is a kinetic. You could, if you're wanting to compare it off frame, you could pair it with Adaptive Frame Syncopation, which is way back in season 16, but that's a different frame. It wouldn't make much sense to compare each with each other, so we'll go with Shattering Bone here. It does have 38 range versus 33 on Shattering, 18 zoom versus 17. It's got 52 stability, 56 reload versus 63 on Chattering, 31 mag versus 33, and 67 handling versus 70. So Chattering Bone does have a slight edge in some of these stats, but again, with it being a kinetic, it doesn't have a kind of draw with it towards being this like half and half. Stasis weapons have the bonus of kinetic and it being an elemental weapon. It gets the bonus of 5% against non-shielded combatants, and then it gets extra damage against shielded combatants. In terms of barrels here, probably looking at Arrowhead Break for that plus 30 to bring it up to a nice and consistent 85. For magazine, probably High Cal for that plus 5 range and the increased stun capability. That's always an important factor in PvE, just being able to get that stun on a bunch of ads. I think it goes up to mini bosses, if I remember correctly. Armor piercing for the same plus 5, and a small benefit on barrier champions, which we have this season with the champion mod with pulse rifles. You could go flared for the reload. It could be valuable depending on what main traits you have. So nice little kind of pick and choose there for barrels and magazines. For the main perks, for column 3, we've got some interesting ones here. We do have Thresh, Killing Wind on core, and well-rounded. So not so much ones that we've maybe talked about in the past, but there are some ones that, you could pair up. For column 4, though, we do have the classic Stasis Headstone perk, which is also a great one. Golden Tricorn is here, which is an interesting one for a pulse rifle, being able to spec that with your stasis grenades and your stasis melees. Desperado, interestingly, is here as well. They have started to split Desperado off into the other frames. Lightweight frame is so far the fastest frame we have for Desperado. I would need to look at the numbers off the podcast to see how exactly that is bumping the RPM by, but that is a very interesting choice. Desperado did get, a couple of, was it 2 seasons ago, it did get the damage reduction in PvE knocked off.
Yep.
So it is definitely one of those perks that you could potentially use. It does sit in the kind of damage perk column, so if you want to go for that kind of weird combination, then Desperado is there. And we have Adaptive Munitions, which is intrinsically for a stasis weapon a very good choice, because there's no stasis shields presently anyway. Stasis has a really good time against shields, and Adaptive Munitions really fills that role. In terms of Masterworks, really up to you what you want to go. There's a very kind of wide array of choices here in terms of synergy. I think the bog standard would maybe go for range and stability, but reload and handling can be your choice as well. Weapon mod, this being a kind of ad clear weapon, going up against ads, minor spec for that 7.77%. In terms of builds, again, we did mention Desperado. Desperado on a lightweight, interesting. A few question marks up in the air. But you could go for Flared Magwell, Encore, and Desperado just for that particular build. If you want to go for a utility build, you've got Thresh. Again, it's a very, very passive perk, but it does increase your super. And you've got, of course, got Headstone. If you want to go down the Stasis Specialist route, then you can go for Well-Rounded and Golden Tricorn. Again, we don't have a lot of weapons. Stasis Weapons is Golden Tricorn, so that's a very interesting build here if you want to go down that route. Speaking of interesting weapons, St. Kabir, what can you say about the next one?
Next up, we got the Glacioclasm, and it is a weapon that I would historically describe as fine, and it has now gone from fine to fantastic with this perk pool update. There are some really nice perks on this, and we're starting off with a pretty good base package. So it is a Void high-impact frame that's a 960 millisecond charge time. This is going to be the same archetype as our Midas Reckoning, right? And I should also mention that it is an Amalon weapon, so it can use Amalon Fluid Dynamics, which Court just mentioned just a second ago. The specific stats on that in the top half of the magazine, it could come into play later on, depending on the role that you're going with. So we'll talk about that one in just a second. As far as its stats compared to its archetype peers, it has the best range stability and handling of the high impact fusions that are available, but the lowest aim assist. So honestly, really good stats, especially, we're comparing weapons like seasonal or event weapons to raid weapons. Raid weapons typically bring really strong stat packages to the table. So seeing something like this that can beat out a weapon like Midas Reckoning in some stats is always really nice. When we take a look at our barrels and mags, for barrels, Fluted is going to give you a really nice bump in handling, which is always needed, plus just a small amount of stability, and then small bore for 7 to range and stability are going to be some great choices there. For your magazine, probably enhanced battery, particle repeater. If you really are loathing the high impact charge time of 960 milliseconds, you can throw accelerated coils on there, bring your charge time down, bring your impact down a little bit. But I know some people really try to get that as low as they can when they're working with a higher fire rate or lower fire rate fusion like this. Now, the main stats is where things just really start getting cooked up here or traits, I should say. In our third column, we have Slide Shot, Subsistence, and Repulsor Brace, which, man, seeing a third column Repulsor Brace, it happens to pair with a couple subclasses, maybe an exotic that came out recently, is getting stronger by the day. And that buff to Void Overshield just makes this even more of an attractive perk.
I don't know what you're talking about, Saint.
Right. No nerf needed here.
Wink.
Keep moving. In the final column, we have got Reservoir Burst and Golden Tricorn, both absolutely top-notch perks for a high-impact fusion rifle like this, and pair really nicely with some of those third-column traits. Looking at their masterwork, I would probably say stability if you are not worried about the charge time. You may want to go reload speed if you're looking to build into a Reservoir Burst build here. If that's what you're really into, then I can see reload speed being very desirable. But yeah, honestly, stability and range, if you're trying to double down on your accelerated coils, you can go with charge time and get that. I think the base goes down to like 920, and then accelerated would take that down even further. So it's taken a few milliseconds off, giving you I would say a noticeable difference if you think that it's just too slow to work with. The weapon mod, I'm probably going major spec, maybe minor, depending on if I'm going with Reservoir Burst or like a Golden Tricorn, trying to clear out large groups of enemies here. But yeah, damage mods can never go wrong in PvE. For our main builds, there are two that really stand out. The first is a really high damage dealing potential one here with Repulsor Brace and Golden Tricorn. If you are running this with a volatile build or anything like that, you're running Control Demo and Titan, Falcon's Hunter, anything like that, the amount of damage you're going to be able to deal and the the way that Golden Tricorn synergizes with debuffing targets and using your abilities is really great. So that is just an absolutely crazy role. Damage dealing and defense granting, simultaneously there. The ad clear role, kind of focus one, has got to be subsistence and reservoir burst. I mean, these perks were just absolutely made for each other. Typically, the best thing you can get with a reservoir burst is a compulsive reloader or a feeding frenzy or something like that. And subsistence is just even better. You can just continually chain these reservoir burst explosions as you go from target to target, even in some high-end content, as these high-impact fusions are putting out a lot of damage as they go, target to target, just blowing things up. That's about all I got for Glacioclasm. I really love to see the big glow up on that. Next up, we've got a machine gun.
We do indeed. This is Avalanche. This is our solar adaptive frame. That's 450 RPM machine gun here. Adaptive frames, the intrinsic there, of course, is just a solid stat package. Really nothing that stands out, nothing that's terrible. So that is native for the adaptives. This additional origin trait for Avalanche is going to be Suros Synergy. So that will be 36 handling and a 20% flinch resistance for 6 seconds after reloading this weapon. Now, a machine gun, of course, you might be thinking, well, that's not going to be too easy. Avalanche does have a 60 reload speed at base, so it is not terrible for a machine gun. Again, some of you might find that a little bit too slow. There are ways to work around that, but yeah, definitely a good pairing there. It's going to be nice and stable for you. When we look at its archetype, peers, and the stats, this is where things kind of get interesting here. So we do have another solar machine gun that came out this season. It is dropping from Trials. It is called the Unwavering Duty. It is the best solar machine gun, adaptive frame machine gun in the game. It's just a stat monster, of course. Trials, one of those few loopholes that kind of do get to break the rules, bend the rules, however you want to say it, when it comes to perk combinations and stats. And Unwavering Duty is top tier in everything except aim assist when you compare it to Avalanche. So that, of course, it's a Trials weapon. That's not going to be quite easy to get, as is Avalanche after donning in. So when we look at our other solar machine gun options here, we did have a craftable one that came out during Season of the Haunted. It is dropping from the dungeon. It's fixed odds. That's the duality dungeon that it drops from. You can craft it. You can get some pretty decent perks as well. Thermal Erosion is our rapid fire that's dropping from Europa, and then I believe Archon's Thunder was the Iron Banner one. That is no longer obtainable, so you either have a good roll of that or you don't. So again, Solar Machine Gun's kind of in a weird spot. Fixed Odds is, I guess, technically, well, Thermal Erosion is technically the easiest one to get, but it's stat package and perk pool is pretty disappointing. So if you have the opportunity, I would definitely try and grab a good Avalanche. Again, being an adaptive frame, it's going to feel pretty decent, and the perk pool as well is very nice. So let's get into that right now. As an adaptive, when it comes to barrels and mags, you can pretty much spec into whatever stat you want, because there's no huge glaring errors that need to be addressed here. You want to go for range, go for range. We've got Hammer Forge. Probably, no need to really hurt stats. I don't think you need to go all the way to full bore. If you want that stability to be a little bit higher, you got plenty of options there. Polygonal. You want handling as a high as well. Fluted's going to be a great option. I mean, pretty much everything is going to be go here. We're sitting at a recoil direction of 70, so if you want to use Arrowhead Break, that'll get you all the way up to 100. That could be very nice, depending on if you struggle maintaining precision shots with a machine gun. Totally an option. Again, I'd say maybe aside from full bore, I don't think you can go wrong on the barrels. On the magazine side, we've got the 3 round perks. I think those are all fantastic options. If the reload speed is a little too slow for you, even at 60, we'll throw on Flared Magwell, get that up to 73 for you. You can also do Light Mag if you want. Or if you are fine with the reload speed, you think you could go a little bit lower, we could go the opposite direction, throw on Extended Mag, get 70 bullets in the magazine there. That's going to bring the reload speed down to 42. You've also got a Pended Mag on there as well if you want a little handling bump. That should sit you at 65, if I recall correctly from my drops. 65 bullets in the magazine. When we look at column 3, again, really great options here for reload perks. Looking at Auto-Loading Holster, Ambitious Assassin, Subsistence, fantastic. Great options for a machine gun, for an ad clear weapon. On the damage side, it gets even better. We've got some great options here, some interesting options as well. Swashbuckler, Adrenaline Junkie, Incandescent, and Target Lock. That's new this season here. So when we think about what to pair with between columns 3 and 4 here, there's a lot of Solar 3.0 synergy. You can definitely go this route. I think I'd probably start with Subsistence or Ambitious Assassin from the column 3, but you have Swashbuckler for Solar Titans and Solar Hunters. You've got Adrenaline Junkie for all 3 classes, and of course Incandescent works with all 3 Solar subclasses as well. So if you are looking for a good Solar machine gun, and you want to tie that into your Solar subclasses, this is definitely a perfect option for you if you have no interest in going into trials to pick up the Unwavering Duty. We also have a second role here that is interesting. I'm putting a question mark next to this because it could be even better come the heavy weapon rework in Lightfall. That would be Ambitious Assassin and Target Lock. So again, Target Lock's our newer perk this season. Damage increases the longer this weapon remains on a target. Now, there's a very tight window between switching from target to target, less than half a second. So it's really meant to be used on one high health target to really wear them down over time. And because it increases over a period of time, machine gun's a pretty natural pairing with the Target Lock perk here. So naturally, we're going to want to give a machine gun as many bullets as possible. So we'll probably put on appended mag or extended mag, and then I would go with Ambitious Assassin here to really give myself a absolutely juiced magazine. You can get over 100 bullets in the chamber, and then I would turn and focus on a boss target so I could get all the way up to the high levels of Target Lock, which, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, that's 40% extra damage by the end. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, yeah.
40%, that is 40. That's what you're sitting at the end of Target Lock. One thing to note here, I did say that Target Lock's a great pairing with machine guns. It's Target Lock procs not based on time, but over the course of your magazine. So it does differentiate over different weapons here. So it's not a hard time set here, but yeah. So on a machine gun, it's going to take a while, but you'll have plenty of bullets to get to that 40%, which is really nice as well. So again, that's a boss damage roll. Machine guns we don't typically think of as boss damage weapons, but we do know that there is a heavy weapon rework on the horizon that could change. If you want to prepare, future you may thank you. Worst case, it just takes up a spot in your vault. But Ambitious Assassin Target Lock, if you get it to drop, just hold on to it. Things might happen. You might be happy that you did. I'm going to pass you over to Court to talk about our final dawning weapon.
Yes, it is the Zypher. It is the Stasis Adaptive Frame Sword. So this is just kind of bog standard frame sword. So your heavy attack will be an uppercut attack. Heavy attacks are stronger with full energy. Unlike the rest of the Dawning weapons, this does not have an additional origin trait, so it's just the Dawning Surprise. And this is another unique one where we actually don't really have anything to compare it with. There's no other stasis swords yet. So we're going to compare it with some other adaptives, of which there are also few and far between. We have the Arc Night Terror from Shadowkeep, and the refreshed Arc Bequest from Deepstone Crypt. And they all share the same stats, with the exception of Bequest having a higher base impact stat. That is 70 to the other 60. So instead we're going to do a little bit different here. I'm going to look at the perk pools and identify which has the best setups and synergy loops. So Bequest has the biggest draw time. The biggest draw due to the high impact stat, plus it's being craftable. But it will take a while for you to get those five red boxes, unless you're going to be farming 24/7 when it's the featured raid. Bequest has access to potentially the best sword damage perk, which is the Enhanced Surrounded. It's the only one that will have access to that so far. It does have some great damage combinations, which we'll talk about that in a future episode. Though it does omit Whirlwind Blade, which is your kind of bog standard sword damage perk. It also has some nice natural synergy with its new origin trait, which is Bray Inheritance, providing a small amount of ability energy per damage dealt. Night Terror is perhaps the easiest to quote farm, as you can repeatedly complete the Essence of Jealousy quest, and it has a small but very acceptable perk pool. It has classic combos like Relentless Strike, Surrounded /Vorpal /Whirlwind Blade /One for All. Unrelenting also appears here, but it's in column 4 as opposed to column 3 on Cypher. And finally, Cypher. It is, of course, only accessible during dawning events, and you're not guaranteed the God roll during the short time, as the three of us can vouch for all of these events. We farm our best, but we can never get the God rolls. However, if you can, there are some really solid combinations in column 3 and 4. Cold Steel is currently the only stasis sword perk for Cypher. We don't have another stasis sword yet. This will synergize with your stasis subclasses, which I'll talk about very shortly. Unrelenting, as I mentioned, is in column 3, not 4. And you do have classic perks like Surrounded, Vorpal, and Whirlwind Blade. Chain Reaction is here as well. It's not the first sword with Chain Reaction, but if you want to have some kind of fun ad clearing, then Chain Reaction is your go-to. Interestingly, Light.gg and various other websites does display the curated role with Osmosis and Cold Steel. It's a very interesting combination, but we are not aware that this drops anywhere, and it's just for display purposes. But I do imagine a Void Gerfalcons with Cold Steel. And that is that is going to be a Lamal for me.
I'm going to need you to stop and freeze still before I explode you, okay? Thank you very much.
Yeah. But yeah. So sadly, that is not a combination that we can have. It's just there for display purposes. Anyway, let's get on to actually breaking down this weapon. For the blade, you either want to go for Jagged for the extra impact, but that does heavily reduce your magazine. Otherwise Tempered, which is your kind of go-to for a combination of impact and magazine and reserve bump. For the guard, it's pretty much one we always recommend, and that's Sword Masters, which is the go-to for PvE. For the main perks, as I've been mentioning, column 3, Relentless Strike or Unrelenting, and for column 4 we have, again, bog standards here. We've got Surrounded, Whirlwind Blade, Vorpal, Chain Reaction, and of course Cold Steel. For the Masterwork, pretty easy to recommend, because there's only one, and that is Impact. And for the weapon mod, you either want to go for Major Spec, which is for champs, or other mini-bosses, and Boss Spec for bosses. So I'm going to recommend 3 builds, one of which I'm going to talk about in reasonably detailed information. For the first build, you've got the Old Reliable, that's Relentless Strikes plus Whirlwind Blades, or Surrounded, or Vorpal. The classic combo, we all know and love, but that's not the main draw for this particular sword. Build 2, which is the sort of fun one, you've got Unrelenting plus Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction of the sword, stasis as well, is fun, but it does restrict you to be being purely ad clear. Unrelenting will keep you in the action for much longer as well, as that does proc off Chain Reaction's effects. And finally, the last build that I want to talk about is the Stasis Synergy. Now, you can go down 2 paths for column 3. You can go for Relentless Strikes or Unrelenting, plus Cold Steel. You want to spec your stasis builds with this excellent synergy. Just a reminder, slow. It has 2 kind of draws with the whole slow and freeze aspect. So Cold Steel applies 40 stacks of slow for the light attack and 60 if it's a heavy attack. Slow lasts for 4.25 seconds in PvE. Previously, Durance was something that I noticed didn't work with Cold Steel, but I've heard reports that now does, so I'm going to need to have a look at that for a future episode kind of reference. You could combo this with Refraction, which is killing slowed enemies grants class ability energy, and Hunters can utilize Grim Harvest, which is killing slowed and frozen enemies spawns stasis shards, which then you can utilize Rhyme to gain health and a stasis overshield. This is where you may want to use Relentless Strikes instead of Unrelenting, but you can double up if you want, and of course you do remember you do have the Dawning Surprise origin trait, which will proc here, so you will be getting quite a lot of health, which is why I would maybe suggest something like Relentless Strikes. Mask of Bacchus for my Hunters as well is another shout out for the 10% on slowed and frozen targets. 100 stacks of slow, you do get freeze, so that's 3 light hits or 1 light plus 1 heavy in quick succession. Combo with Chains, which is 40% DR near frozen enemies. You could combo it with Hedrons, which is plus 60 mobility, resilience, and recovery. Combo with Refraction, which I already mentioned there. It does apply for frozen enemies as well. And you could also combo with Warlock's Glacial Harvest. Again, similar synergy as Grim Harvest. For freezing enemies, it spawns the stasis shards, which you can then use for other things. So that's my recommended build there. Let's build 3, the stasis synergy. All right, that is our very interesting look at the Dawning Weapons. Anything we want to say before we move on to our second of 3 topics?
I mean, it's the most weapons for our festivity type events, and also, unsurprisingly, the highest quality. I mean, yeah, a lot of weapons to choose from, and a lot of good stuff to go for on those weapons. So definitely play your Dawning if you have the time to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super interested in Cold Front, and I think that part of the reason for that is because I have a similar SMG, Extraordinary Edition with like Firmly Planted in Frenzy that I use a lot, but there are rolls on all other 4 weapons that I'm chasing, which that feels good. It's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's crack on with Seraph Weapons. That's Season 19's collection of weapons. I'll pass you over to Saint, who'll talk about the origin trait.
For the origin trait, we have Ambush. It improves range, handling, and damage against combatants for the opening moments of an engagement. Okay, so what does that actually translate to? After maintaining a state of not being in combat or receiving damage for at least 5 seconds, kind of like a one quiet moment type of a thing, you have increased range, handling, and damage for 2 seconds after dealing or receiving any damage. Still need to nail down the numbers, confirm these, but it looks like about plus 15 range, plus 10 handling, and about 8 to 11% damage increase. So, a nice stat bumps, plus 10s, plus 15s, about a plus 10% to our damage. Kind of like an opening shot, but a little bit different, reworked into this perk here. So, pretty good. And we also have the Legacy Ambush, which is going to increase the range and handling granted by this. Usually it's about double whatever the origin trait, the mod for the origin trait will usually double that impact. Still need to do some testing on that though. So pretty good perk here. Extra little bit of damage in PvE never hurts. Its main traits for Disparity is the first weapon I'll start off with here, I should say. It is... it's pretty unique in that it's a aggressive frame pulse rifle that is not found through the in-game. And that sounds like a bit strange to say, but for a while, the only aggressive frame pulse rifles that you could get were Sacred Providence and Insidious, right? And those were found through Garden and Val, respectively. So this season, we've seen a little bit of a democratization, right, of this weapon archetype, the aggressive burst. And the first one, Stasis here. Also had the Void Velis X added in as kind of our seasonal pinnacle weapon. So pretty interesting to see this open up a little bit. This weapon comes with that ambush trait we just discussed, and then also comes with Hake Breach armaments for its second origin trait if you want to swap between those two. It's pretty good stat-wise. It's got some highs and lows here when we compare it to the other competitors that we just mentioned. Now, keep in mind that this is much easier to access than some of those other weapons, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has the worst stats. It is the worst in range amongst its peers, but it is the highest in handling, so a little back and forth there. Second highest in stability with 59 stability, lowest with 28 reload, but then highest again at 19 zoom versus the 18 that is common on some of its counterparts. So a bit of a mixed bag here. Its highest handling stat in class is still only 30 handling, so we're probably going to want to pump that up. Fluted is definitely great for that, giving that plus 15 to an archetype of weapon. It just does not have great handling from the jump. And, you got Arrowhead Break as well as a pretty good option, taking that recoil direction from 67 to 97. I don't think that I find it super important on a weapon like this, and there's also some perks that may be able to help you out and not necessarily drive towards such a high recoil direction. But yeah, I would definitely take Fluted on this to bump that handling way up. For the mag, Tack and Flared are both really nice. Tack will give you an extra 4 bullets in the mags, an extra burst that also grants 10 reload and 5 stability. And then Flared, if you really want to pump it up, if you're not getting reload speed from anywhere else, would give you plus 15 reload and 5 stability, which is pretty low. As I mentioned, this is 28 reload. It's like worst in class per aggressive. So Flared could be a decent choice depending on what you land on for your main traits here. Finally, getting back to the actual main traits, in column 3, we have some decent utility. There definitely seems like there's some more Crucible-focused perks here. With this being a crafted weapon, I don't know if I mentioned that about this at the beginning of the set, but yeah, the weapons that we'll talk about in this entire next set are all craftable. So it's definitely something that you're going to be able to put enhanced traits on. And we see some stuff like Eye of the Storm and Moving Target. Those aren't really great for Crucible, for PvE, but we do have some good traits for PvE in Rapid Hit. We've got Outlaw, very classic, as well as Pugilist for a little bit of utility in that third column there. And then in the fourth column is where things really start to heat up. And this is kind of what, to me, saves a maybe not stellar weapon is a really nice perk set in the final column here. We've got Frenzy, Headstone, One for All, Swashbuckler, and Desperado. So a lot of Desperado getting spread around this season, which is great to see. Really interesting to see it on an aggressive burst. This is definitely the first time that Desperado has showed up on an aggressive burst. This is also the first Stasis one, so it's definitely the first time for Headstone as well, right? That's good to see. A couple first on this guy. If we're looking for specific masterwork, I'm going to be able to choose. I'm probably going Handling or Reload, depending on what I picked for. If I pick Arrowhead or Fluted on my barrel, right, and what stats do I still need to kind of push up a little bit. Probably going with Handling, maybe Reload Speed. Just depends on that. For our main builds, there are a few that jump out, and I think there's a lot of ways that you could take this since there are so many good perks in that fourth column. You got Rapid Hit and Headstone. Rapid Hit rewards crits and Headstone requires them, so I feel like that's a very natural pairing to put together. We've got Outlaw and One for All. I think that some people may find using an aggressive to hit 3 separate targets may feel a little clunkier than it would for a rapid fire or like an SMG and auto that these are very popular on. And if you don't want to go that route, you also have Frenzy. And Frenzy giving those huge buffs to our Handling and Reload is going to be a really nice part of this. We're getting 50 to Handling and Reload when Frenzy is up, as well as that 15% damage increase. So not quite the 35% from One for All, but if you are working with a role of this that doesn't have the best stats, then Frenzy is going to be able to grab that, really low Handling or Reload speed that's in the 30s or 40s and just crank it right up into the 80s and 90s, which is absolutely awesome. If I'm going with Frenzy, I think it was something like Heating Up. You could go Rapid Hit and Frenzy to really just make this the most laser pulse rifle ever. But something like Heating Up, it just seems like it offers a little more if I'm already nearly maxing out my Handling and Reload speed from something like Frenzy, even though that's not something you see super often in PvE. Overall, solid weapon, solid primary, nothing crazy. New appearance for the archetype, a little bit easier to access, which is nice to see if you're somebody that's just not really jumping into a lot of raids that you never landed a good roll of Sacred Provenance or Insidious. So always love to see that. Next up, we got a bow.
We've got an arc lightweight frame bow in Tripwire Canary. Again, this is craftable. Lightweight frame bows, we are looking at a frame bonus of plus 20 mobility. Get a little movement bonus that is quite nice when the weapon is equipped, of course. Outside of the ambush origin trait, Tripwire Canary also comes with the Viced Stinger origin trait, which is very nice for bows in particular. Bows do receive a faster draw speed and when the perk is active, when Viced Stinger is active. So very, very effective perk. Definitely will have that one over ambush on Tripwire Canary when I get to crafting this. So let's talk about our archetype peers here. There are 4 non-sunset arc bows, 2 lightweights and 2 precisions. I know some people really care about the difference between how a lightweight and a precision matter, so I'll touch on the lightweights first here. The existing one is Arsenic Bite 4B. This is, I believe, only available from Banshee and Xur on the weekends. That Xur, not Dares of Eternity Xur. I know the Banshee has sold a pretty decent roll of Arsenic Bite, but again, your chances of getting this have been quite low. Bungie is aware of this, so they gave us Tripwire Canary, which has, it's basically a carbon copy of Arsenic Bite, but better perks. So that's definitely my recommendation there. Arsenic does have a bit better stats than Tripwire Canary, but again, Tripwire is craftable and far more easily accessible. So I think it evens out in the end. On the Precision Arc Bow front, we do have Wolftone Draw from Season of the Lost. Again, this is only dropping from Weekend Xur, so pretty hard to acquire it now, but that did have some very solid perks, good PvE perk combos there. If you missed out on Season of the Lost and you do not like lightweight frame bows, you have one final option, that is Point of the Stag. This is in the Exotic Kiosk. That's where you can go and buy it. It has a fixed roll. You have 2 options in columns 3 and 4. You've got No Distractions and Archer's Tempo in column 3, and Vorpal Weapon and Eye of the Storm in column 4. So the PvE roll there would probably be Archer's Tempo or No Distractions and then Vorpal Weapon. Not great, but again, if you absolutely need an arc precision frame bow, this is your best option, or you just have to wait and hope that Xur will sell you a decent Wolftone draw. For the rest of us who do like using lightweight frames, Tripwire Canary is the best option here, so let's get into it. On the bowstring here, I am going with Elastic. Now, this is going to hurt my accuracy a little bit, but again, we want to get that draw time down as low as possible. That is really the most important stat to modify. Accuracy is the second most important one, but we get the draw time down through our bowstring, and then we have a way in our arrow column to get that accuracy loss back with fiberglass arrow shaft. That's going to give me a plus 15 to the accuracy that'll make up and overcome the deficiency in the elastic string loss of 10 for accuracy. I am losing out on 5 stability with fiberglass, but again, I can overcome that with perk in column 3. We could do rapid hit if we really wanted to get more stability back. But for me personally, the stability of a lightweight combat bow doesn't matter too much because I'm typically trying to do a full draw and then release as quickly as possible for those follow-up arrow shots. Now, when I've broken down bows before, the tried and true peanut butter and jelly combo that we always look for is Archer's Tempo and Explosive Head. This is fantastic in GMs when we have a bow champion mod. That's what I always like to use. That is present here on Tripwire Canary. You are more than welcome to use that combo. That's going to be a fantastic option. But in column 3, we do have a damage perk. We have Dragonfly showing up there. So I can pair Dragonfly with Explosive Head on Tripwire Canary. And that is the role that I'm going to be chasing. I will say in column 4, we have some other excellent options here. You do have Frenzy, if you want just a general damage perk that's going to be great at all difficulty levels. If you want to make Dragonfly your only damage perk, that's not a bad option either. You can pair it with Successful Warm-Up in column 4. Now that's going to help with your charge and draw speed when you get those final blows. And again, with Dragonfly, that's going to be quite easy to do with that explosion. So you've got a lot of different options here. Again, we don't get a lot of double damage perks, so I'm going to be getting that role specifically and craft that with Enhanced Dragonfly and Enhanced Explosive Head. And this will probably be my arc bow for the foreseeable future, at least, of Destiny 2. Now, I do want to talk about Dragonfly and why Dragonfly is such a great perk on bows. Just real quick here. In the past, I've talked about how Dragonfly is great because of the fact that bows have a higher impact stat, and that just makes it better. That makes Dragonfly better. That's not entirely true. I want to, at least give some clarifications here. The way the Dragonfly works, of course, when you land that precision hit and you defeat a target, that has an elemental explosion that takes place afterwards. What's really happening here is that Dragonfly has a multiplier that it applies to the precision damage that you dealt that ends up being the final blow. However, this multiplier is different for different weapon archetypes. So that is something that's really important to note. And what I'm about to talk about, the numbers that I'm going to share with you, I've gotten off of the Destiny 2 outgoing damage scaling spreadsheet. This is by Mossy Max, a member of the Destiny Massive Breakdowns community. I want to give him a quick shout out. He does fantastic work getting hard numbers here. So For primary weapons, when you're looking for Dragonfly on a primary weapon, trying to figure out if that's worth pursuing, the two highest multipliers are present on bows and hand cannons. A bow Dragonfly multiplier is 2.5, and on hand cannons, it is 2.13. All the other primary weapons have multipliers below that 2.0. So for me, that is a fantastic option. It translates to, over 2.0 translates to a really good explosive damage when you're dealing with minor enemies that happen to be grouped up to whatever target you just killed. It makes for a really good add clear option as well. So the fact that I can pair an add clear weapon perk like Dragonfly with explosive head, which is great for stunning champions on the same weapon, is fantastic, and that's why I'm recommending that double damage combo here. So again, if you're ever unsure when you see Dragonfly on a primary weapon, go check the spreadsheet. You've also got different values for the special weapons that Dragonfly can roll on, as well as the heavy weapons. So that's always something to be aware of. People always ask, how can you tell if a perk's going to be good on a given weapon? Just knowing about those kind of values. Again, we have so many different resources at Destiny Massive Breakdown's website. The outgoing damage scaler spreadsheet is one of them. That's what I use to consult when I'm trying to figure out what would be a god roll for a particular weapon. So again, just to recap here, Tripwire Canary, we're looking at Elastic String, Fiberglass Arrow Shaft, Dragonfly, and then Explosive Head if you want to use this in GMs, or Frenzy would be a fantastic option there for a double damage with a little bit of stat bumps. And for the masterwork, again, we can craft it, so we'll really narrow down here. I'm going to go with draw time. If you're fine with draw time, you think it's fast enough, you can spec into accuracy and get that higher up as well. And then you can do a minor spec or major spec if you really want to. And you will have a very, very S tier, dare I say, primary weapon for high level PvE, if I do say so myself. Court, what can you tell us about our next arc weapon from the Seraph weapon pool?
Yeah, this is Path of Least Resistance, is the Arc Adaptive Trace Rifle, and this completes the legendary Trace Rifle Light Trifecta, so it follows in the footsteps of Retrace Path and Hollow Denial. It can swap between the Seraph Origin traits or Omelon Fluid Dynamics. Top half of the magazine has up to 20 stability and 30 reload speed, decreased as the mag gets lower and disappears at 50%. So like I said, it is we're going to be comparing it with its Solar and Void siblings. It does have the highest range of 69. Stability is at 73, which is actually the lowest. Hollow has the highest at 75. Handling is in the middle at 52. Hollow has the highest at 55. Reload is lowest at 40. Hollow has the highest at 46. And the recoil direction is middle, which is 95, and Hollow has 99. So, a little bit of mixed stats here, but you can redeem these by speccing into various perks. And as it does have some interesting potential for damage, which I'll talk about much later on. In terms of barrels and magazines, for the barrels, we've got Arrowhead Break, which maximizes out the recoil direction up to 100 and plus 10 handling. Corkscrew Rifling for that plus 5 to stability, range, and handling. Fluted for that plus 5 to stab and plus 15 to handling. And Small Bore for that plus 7 to stab and range. Battery, Tactical for plus 5 to range and stab. And plus 10 to reload. Particle Repeater for plus 10 to stability. Enhance for the magazine bump increase, and you could also go for light as well for that plus 10 to handling and plus 10 to reload, just to help those stats out. I'll go on to what recommendations I would go for as we talk about builds. For the main perks here, you've got very interesting choices here. For column 3, you've got subsistence, you've got triple tap, stats for all, and adaptive munitions makes another appearance on a trace rifle. For column 4, Volt Shot is here. One for All is also here, so you can go for that sofa roll. And Focus Fury, very interesting, very interesting. For the mod preferences, where you want to masterwork, it's a toss-up here. Now, reload if you aren't using subsistence. The builds that I'm going to recommend, we aren't actually recommending subsistence, but if you want to go down that route, then don't bother with reload. You'd want to go for stability. If you are going down the triple tap and the focus fire path, again, stability is maybe where you want to go. Maybe seeing a running theme here. For the weapon mod, minor spec for trash adds, otherwise major if you intend to maximize the damage potential versus elites, mini-bosses and champions. Again, if you're going down the route of triple tap and focus fury, then boss spec for those bosses. Volt shot looks pretty appetizing. Now, we'll be talking about Volt shot a little bit later on in the next category of weapons, but for this particular weapon, it's a little bit of a trap perk. We were maybe just kind of umming and ahhing about it before we started recording. Subsistence doesn't synergize with Volt shot. It's not a clean reload, if you want to call it that. And it's not considered a true reload, where Volt Shot will require a true reload. If you want to pair Volt Shot, then maybe Stats for All, and then maximize out your reload on top of the reload you get from Stats for All on top of Omolon Fluid Dynamics, just so you can just keep refreshing it at the top half of the magazine. Might be a little bit too cumbersome to do that, just constantly like having to shoot, then reload, shoot, and then reload. So if you can make it work, then sure, go nuts, but it's not something that we're going to be recommending this time. Again, honorable mention here with adaptive munitions. That's always a great perk. I talked about stasis, the stasis pulse rifle in the previous section. That's always a great one for stasis weapons, but I think adaptive munitions on trace rifles are really solid as well. And if we ever get a trace rifle barrier champion mod, that would be even more delicious for them. For their first build, we haven't talked about the sofa roll for a long time, so I will recommend Stats for All and One for All. For their build, second build here, it's going to go down the route of like this being a kind of pseudo cold heart damage build. So specifically, you want to go for small bore and particle repeater. Small bore for that +7 to stab and range, and particle for the +10 to stability. Noticing a trend here, we're going to keep things very stable here. Stability, masterwork, and triple tap and focused fury. And we're also going to be using either major or boss spec, depending on what you're going to be using here, but this may be a more kind of boss-centric weapon here. Ambush trait is the one you may want to go for. We're not going to be utilizing Omolon Fluid Dynamics with this type of build, so just to squeeze out that damage stat, the stat and the damage bump the ambush gives you. And triple tap synergizes with focus fury very well, providing you are hitting your precision shots, which is why we want to maximize stability here. So just a quick refresher of triple tap. Scoring 3 precision hits refunds 1 ammo to the magazine. The counter resets if no precision hits are scored within 2 seconds. And of course you can enhance these, and this will go up to 3 seconds. Focus fury. We've talked about this before in many episodes, but as another reminder, upon hitting 50% of magazine as precision hits, it's 20% increased damage for 11 seconds. Refreshable by hitting precisions at 50% magazine quota. And it always goes by your base magazine stat. So triple tap will just keep refreshing. It doesn't matter what the actual magazine count is, as long as internally the game will count down from the top half of the magazine down to the middle. Stowing or reloading resets that precision counter, but the buff does persist through stow if you are doing that during when it's active. Enhanced does bring that duration up to 12 seconds. So this is great for longer damage phases on big bulky targets with a sort of medium to large crit spots. If you could make it work for smaller crit spots, then even better. But you could have some utility against champions, again, if we ever get trace rifle mods in the future. So very interesting build there. I haven't yet quite got I haven't got this crafted just yet. I think I'm up to 3 out of the 5 red boxes. But this is one that I'm very interested to taking out for a spin. And that is your kind of pseudo cold heart damage build. Speaking of a very unique weapon, Saint, what can you talk about our next one?
The next weapon is an entirely new weapon archetype. which we love to see. And there's a couple of this season that we mentioned in our previous episode. I'm talking about the Judgment of Kel'Garath. This is a solar aggressive frame glaive. It's 45 RPM, and it's described as hard-hitting slow melee. It can also alternate between the Hake Breach Armaments origin trait, depending on what you're working with. I don't think you're going to be hitting well swords with this thing, but if you end up in that position, then, you're ready for it. I'm probably definitely going to be taking ambush so I can capitalize on like my first shot of engagement with the glaive, which is already hitting pretty hard. If I'm getting an extra 10%, I jump into the mix. I shoot, a glaive round off. I am probably going to be capitalizing on that. So when we look at how this compares to the other legendary glaives that we have in the game, it is closest to the Edge of Intent, which is the Warlock exotic glaive. Remember that those exist in the game, remember? And whenever we kind of just compare it to general adaptives, it's 45 RPM versus 55. It's got a little higher range, higher impact, lower handling, lower shield duration. So those are how I anticipate the stats will play out in the future if we continue to see more glaives like this. The stats don't exactly line up with Edge of Intent, but the RPM is the only one that's closest. And the exotics previously were the only glaives in the game that had any deviation of rounds per minute or anything like that outside of our few legendaries, are one of each light element. The barrel, aka the half, is kind of like our grip, I guess, on the glaive. I'm not exactly sure, but the two that I would probably recommend are Auxiliary Reserves and Low Impedance Wings. Auxiliary Reserves gives 15 to shield duration and charge time, takes 10 out of reload, but we can compensate for that in other ways with other traits. And then the Low Impedance Wings will give 10 to shield duration and charge time and 5 to reload, but a minus 10 to range, which, if you remember, is tied to the projectile velocity for glaive. So I know some people really want to keep that as high as possible and won't be interested in it. So I think Auxiliary Reserves is probably what I'm going to be going for here for that just nice bump in the shield. On the magazine size, you can go appended for just a +1 to the mag, which is like 3, and we want to bump that up to 4. So I think that's a really good option there. There is also light mag for +10 reload and +5 range if you want to double down into that velocity. When we get to the main traits, this is where this thing goes from interesting to spicy. We've got Overflow, Demo, and Pugilist in the third column. Overflow definitely being my pick there, and also the reason why I wouldn't mind if I tank my reload speed, which is already not great, but if I'm running Overflow, the odds that I have to reload this weapon very often are pretty low, which is great. In the final column, we have Surrounded, Incandescent, Close to Melee, and Unstoppable Force. The Close to Melee is a brand new perk for this season, and it is a pretty interesting one. I will have to pull the exact damage numbers back up here in just a second, but it is definitely a perk that works well with the kind of the flow of the glaive overall. And it's kind of synergistic depending on what you're running. You got Demo and Pugilist, which are definitely the utility ones, but if I'm running Overflow, I'm already not very worried about reloading or anything like that. And Close to Melee states that glaive projectile final blows improve glaive melee damage. A projectile or melee damage extends its duration. It's about 30%, which is pretty similar to another perk that we have, Unstoppable Force. 30% increased projectile damage while you block damage. And this is kind of the flip side of that. If I get a funnel blow with my projectile and I'm using ambush, which is, kind of leaning into this, I can jump into the encounter. I've got 10% extra damage. I land my final blow right off the bat, and then I'm getting a pretty high damage increase here to McGlaive. So interesting perk, new perk. Definitely going to want to try that out. I haven't gotten one of these to roll with that yet, but we're still in the early days of the season, so I'm sure that I'll be getting my hands on one of those and potentially craft that on it, depending on how I end up feeling. The Another thing I would say is, as far as just recommendations, is probably range masterwork. If we want to bump up that velocity just a little bit, that's going to be a pretty nice masterwork. It's not going to be a massive impact, but it's pretty nice. And then our main builds, I'm probably going, overflow and like a close to melee or surrounded with bolt be really nice. Another combo that comes up on this weapon that also would kind of help you circumvent reload is demo and incandescent. This is like the battler combo that I run, and it's absolutely great. The incandescent burn ticks towards the demolitionist restoration, or return of energy there, and then whenever I get final blows, my targets are exploding. I'm getting energy. I throw to reload my glaive. I'm circumventing my reload speed. So kind of a fun one there with demo incandescent. I'll probably realistically try out an overflow and maybe close to melee or surrounded. Probably going to craft one of those, but I have to give it a little bit more time on the rolls to see what I finally land on there. Very cool looking weapon, I gotta say too. A buddy of mine was like, I never thought I'd need a laser sight on my glaive, but here we are,
Big ol' blade.
We've got a couple heavy weapons to round us out here for the Seraph set.
Yeah, I'll be talking about my second machine gun of the episode here. This is Retrofit Escapade. This is a Void rapid fire frame machine gun, 900 RPM rapid fire frame, of course. That is deeper ammo reserves, and then a slightly faster reload when the magazine is empty. Retrofit has an additional origin trait that is Seraph Synergy. Again, really helping out on the reloading, so getting 36 handling and that 20% flinch resistance for 6 seconds after you reload. So little combo there between the frame and the origin trait. We always like to see that. We have one other Void rapid-fire frame machine gun that is not Sunset. It is Shattered Cypher all the way back in Season of the Splicer. Thankfully, Retrofit Escapade is better in every stat, so we don't have to talk too much about that. Where the real competition comes from is the other two Void machine guns that we have access to. They both drop from raids. I am talking about Commemoration, which is now craftable. That is from Deepstone Crypt, and Corrective Measure, which is from Vault of Glass. Just keep those two in the back of your mind here. We'll go through the perks and I'll talk about some of the recommendations I'm about to make. But those two machine guns are better for certain circumstances. So some of the perks that show up on this gun, I'll probably recommend that you go and chase on one of those, depending on if you have access to a consistent raid team. So with that in mind, let's get into Retrofit Escapade's barrels. This is a rapid fire, and the most important stat that matters on rapid fire machine guns is the recoil direction. We are sitting at 55, so again, because this is craftable, I'm really only going to recommend Arrowhead Break. If you think you can handle a 55 recoil direction, you could go for even more handling and stability with Fluted Barrel, but I think for the vast majority of people that do want to craft this and use it, Arrowhead Break is going to be the best option here. Get that recoil direction all the way up to 85. Tap firing is really the name of the game when it comes to rapid fires, unless you have excellent control of whatever input method you use. I think tapping is kind of the key here. Just think of tap the trigger when you're using a rapid fire machine gun. When we look at the magazine perks here, you don't have a lot of rounds. It's just accurized. I don't think we need more range on this machine gun, but you're welcome to go that route if you want. We do have a lot of mag perks, though. Appended, tack, extended, and then if you do need some help with the reload speed, you've got flared and alloy as well. I'm probably going to go with tack or appended when I craft this. I think tack, just for the small stat bumps, is going to be helpful as well, just stacking on top of what Arrowhead also gives. Now, when we get into the perks, we're going to step away from Retrofit and just briefly talk about what Commemoration and Corrective Measure bring to the table here. So again, if you have access to a raid team and you can go and do Vault of Glass and Commemoration with ease, I think you're going to want to look for some Void synergies on the two raid machine guns. Commemoration, we'll talk about this when we come back in the new year, but it does have access to some more Void-specific perks, so there's a little bit more room for synergy. Corrective Measure does roll with Demo and Adrenaline Junkie, so if you want to do a Void grenade build, I definitely think Corrective Measure is probably one of the better options here. Retrofit Escapade does have Golden Tricorn. You can definitely spec into a Void build with that perk as well. That'll be excellent. I think that will be the route to go if you do not have a raid team. if you're not somebody who consistently raids and is able to get corrective measures and commemorations. So if this is your only chance at a Void machine gun and you really want to have one, let's go with Golden Tricorn in column 4. When I look at the reload perks on Retrofit Escapade, we've got some really good options here. Feeding Frenzy could be really useful. You can certainly get to that ×4 and ×5 with ease as an ad clear weapon primarily, so that will definitely help with the reload speed, make that nice and snappy. You'll have Suro Synergy proccing there once that happens. If you want to have more bullets, we've got Field Prep. Always a great option. I typically go with that. It's great in solo content. When I don't need to do extra steps, I can hide behind cover, just pop a squat and get a little boost to my reload speed there. And the extra bullets, of course, do not hurt. We also have stats for all as well. Get that stat package up a little bit more. That's going to be very helpful, especially that 30 handling and 35 reload speed with that duration scalar bonus as well. Very, very nice. And then we have a weird perk here, 4 times the charm. That doesn't seem like that's going to be very easy to proc on a rapid fire, but bear with me. I think there's some use here. So again, moving over to column 4, if you're interested in having that Void 3.0 synergy, I think Golden Tricorn's the best option here. We do have one for all. You can definitely use that. Get the Sofa roll going for that ad clear potential. You've got Vorpal Weapon. I don't think machine guns should be used for damage, but I'm about to correct myself in a moment here. There's actually a better option than Vorpal Weapon here for that. And then finally, we do have Frenzy and Rampage, kind of those tried and true, the classics. So got plenty of different options here. The last one I want to talk about is Target Lock. Target Lock does also show up on Retrofit Escapade, and we can pair it with 4 times the charm, which is a pretty natural pairing. So I think if you want to, again, depending on how this heavy weapon rework shakes out in Lightfall, if you really, want to be thinking ahead, the play here would be extended mag, 4 times the charm, Target Lock for a long firing, high damage dealing option against boss targets. Get ramped up all the way to 40%. Keep landing those crits. Again, you're probably going to need Divinity if this is how the heavy weapon meta looks in Lightfall. It's going to be very hard to hit precisions unless you're standing right next to the boss, which again, sometimes we do that in certain raids and dungeons. Sometimes that's a bad idea. So we'll see how things shake out. But yeah, definitely Appended or Extended Mag, 4 times the charm, Target Lock. That's kind of a roll that maybe if I get it to drop randomly, I'll just save it. I don't know if I craft it necessarily until we find out what that heavy weapon meta is going to be, but it is an option here on this machine gun. So we'll just keep that in the back of the mind. But again, for those of you that really want a Void 3.0 machine gun that's going to put in work, I think Commemoration is probably the best bet, and then Corrective Measure is a very close second. Retrofit should be probably the third option. We can just go for a straight damage dealing build here, and I think we'll be pretty good to go.
I'm just imagining the sound of 6 900 RPM or 5 900 RPM machine guns just tearing away at a boss. So
it's going to be a light show. All right, we've got one more weapon from the Seraph loot pool. Very exciting weapon. Court, what are we talking about?
Yeah, speaking of damage weapons, we have the Fire and Forget, which is, I suppose, the replacement to the now cycled out Reese Regret. It's not the same frame, though. This joins Storm Chaser as the second aggressive frame linear fusion rifle. It rolls with Ambush, as do all of these weapons, but also rolls with Vice Stinger, which is the one you're going to be going for very important reasons. Before we get into that, though, let's just do a quick kind of archetype check and stats. So Storm Chaser wins in every stat except range. So Fire and Forget's got 35, and Storm Chaser's got 31, and the rest Storm Chaser has an edge over. But I think Fire and Forget has an edge over Storm Chaser with reasons we'll get onto here. In terms of barrels that you want to go for here, it's fluted or polygonal for that stability bump. Very important here, super important. And for magazine, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, that is enhanced battery, just to get that slight bump in the battery magazine count, which will also help with Vice Stinger. In terms of the main perks here, some very interesting ones. Headstone is here. column 3, normally Headstone's more of a column 4 slot, considered more of a damage perk, but it's column 3. But we also have Field Prep, which one that we're likely going to recommend here. Field Prep's your really bog standard, increasing your inventory size, very kind of hidden stat for weapons, but also the reload speed. Not that you'll be needing it with Vice Stinger. For column 4, we do have Frenzy, we've got Chill Clip, we've got Vorpal Weapon, and we have Focused Fire here. Sorry, Focused Fury. Interesting perks here. I think the ones that we'll be kind of aiming towards would be Focused Fury. But if you're not that interested in Focused Fury, you could go for Frenzy and Vorpal. Frenzy's always your kind of bog standard damage perk. Jack of all trades here. Doesn't necessarily just give you damage bonus here. It does give you that stability. Your plus 50 and plus 50 reload speed and plus 50 handling. For the masterwork, really, it's up to you. We've talked about this before: charge time, range, handling, reload, and stability. I would probably go for stability here, just to really pump out the juice out of this. Again, it's a very, when you do fire this weapon, it fires pretty strange compared to Storm Chaser. If you're used to Storm Chasers feeling this particular weapon, we're not entirely sure if this is intended or not, but the feeling of this weapon, it's got a lot more bounce than Storm Chaser. So for the time being, with this being a crafted weapon, you can swap these out. But for the time being, stability is the one you want to go for. Of course, you're going to be using this for either champions or bosses, so it's major or boss spec, respectively. In terms of the builds here, if you want to go down the route of Stasis Synergy, Headstone and Chill Clip are here. Two of the 3 stasis perks that we have right now are on this weapon. So if you want to fully go down that route, Stasis Synergy, I talked about in the previous section with the Pulse Rifle Stay Frosty. You could go down that route in terms of synergizing. Same with Zypher as well in the previous section. Going down that route of synergizing with Chains, Hedrons, Refraction, Grim Harvest, all that jazz. If you want to hear more of that, rewind back to that particular section. I won't go over too much detail here though. So Headstone, Chill Clip, if you want that stasis build. For the build 2 here, this is your boss damage build, and that's Field Prep and Vorpal or Focused Fury. Now the big question here is, how does Focused Fury work on a 3-round burst linear fusion rifle? Well, it's not as what I think most of us were anticipating. So it's not an individual ammo count per burst. So if you've got 5 in the magazine, you will need to hit 3 shots for Focused Fury to proc. It's not a case of, that would be 15 bullets, so that would be 8 shots. So just take that with consideration. Again, that's why we've been recommending stability here. But very interesting weapon here. As we've been talking about the sort of heavy ammo revamp for Lightfall, this may come down a little bit. I mean, Storm Chaser is still one of the kind of top DPS weapons, and Fire and Forget does join that. I haven't really personally seen many up to the minute damage comparisons. There's been a few kind of floating in the air. But I would like to see, at the end of this season, just a really kind of top level comparison between all the LFRs. But I do feel like this weapon, if you can land those shots, big if you can land those shots with Focus Fury, then you'd be doing really well here. Very interesting weapon. This is maybe the one weapon I don't have any progress yet, because it refuses to drop for me.
Oh no.
So I haven't had much time. I've had a few random rolls, sadly not. I had Headstone and I think High Impact reserves, but not the Headstone and Chill Clip, which I really want to try out. That'd be very interesting. And just as a little kind of side here, the way Vice Stinger works, it works by the individual shot. So you will never really have to reload. You'll have a lot of chances for Vice Stinger to activate. And which is why, we aren't recommending reload perks here, with the exception of Fuel Prep, which is for different reasons. It's for the inventory stat increase. But that's how Vice Stinger works, and it works really well on this linear fusion rifle. All right, any final thoughts on the Season 19 Seraph weapons? We'll be discussing the 7 Seraph weapons. That's the carbine and the hand cannon. Another time. That's not this episode. But yeah, any final thoughts?
Probably the best seasonal batch we've got. I mean, I didn't think they would top Risen, but there's some bangers. They went all out. The extra origin traits, I think, really do give a whole other dimension to these. I mean, Vice Stinger on a 3-round burst LFR is nutty. So yeah, very, very excited. Even though we know LFRs are getting hit, knocked down a peg or two, this is still going to be, just one of the best LFRs. So get those red borders.
I know they're getting nerfed because it's getting democratized, and that's how I know it's coming. They're like, all right, we'll give everybody a chance to get your stasis linear, go have some fun with your Phantom Might builds, because some nerfs coming to town. Or at least that's my theory, all right?
Yeah, that would super good point there about the synergy with Font of Might. Stasis is always a good one for getting that extra Font of Might damage, 25%. Very easy to get. But yeah.
Yeah, and if you've heard people talk about this a lot, and you've never actually used an elemental time dilation build yourself to fight a boss, dude, this is it. Go get that, Focus Fury roll or whatever, whatever roll you'd like on this, with like the fuel prep, right? And that's gonna have really, really high total damage output, probably even better than Reed's because it's a burst. I would think. I have to do some testing on that, but yeah, it's got to be really good.
All right. Well, that is that for that particular section. We're going to go on to our last with the 4 IKELOS weapons. Saint, what can you tell us about the origin trait?
The IKELOS weapons are back with an origin trait called Rasputin's Arsenal. It states, breaking a target shield partially reloads this weapon's magazine. Breaking elemental shield, barrier shield, guardian shield will refill 50% of your magazine, in fact, which is it's pretty good. This is like Genesis Light, and it's not a bad perk at all. So pretty interesting origin trait, definitely a little bit different, and kind of seeing how ambush is a bit of like opening shot, right? Rasputin's Arsenal is a bit of Genesis, and kind of seeing a little bit of a watered down versions of these perks work their way into origin traits. We're starting off here with a hand cannon by the name of the IKELOS hand cannon V1.03, and yeah,
one of the hand cannons of all time.
It truly is. It truly is. You can get these weapons from Rasputin nodes using your resonance stems, engram focusing at the seasonal vendor, and potentially elsewhere. But I think that's all we know for sure right now as we get later into the season. These weapons are craftable as well. Our first weapon here is that IKELOS hand cannon with 180 RPM void precision frame. So it's got that more predictable recoil pattern, so you can kind of ignore the recoil direction a little bit. But what you can't ignore is how bad the rest of its stats are. It's got really, really pretty bad stats compared to every other Energy 180. Frontier's Cry, Solar, Nation of the Beast, Arc, and Posterity Arc all just really are better weapons from the stat standpoint. It's worse in class for its range stability, handling, reload speed. It's tough. Not starting off great, but there's a few redeeming things about this weapon. We're looking at barrels. I'm probably looking for a corkscrew, hammer forged, or fluted. Maybe for the handling, corkscrew and hammer forged are pretty nice. If you're willing to invest in range, the range band on a hand cannon like this is pretty decent. I think base range is around 28 meters, and you could take that all the way up to 32, 33 meters if you're willing to invest in a couple of range perks. On the magazine side, there's a win that we'll see a few times here with Seraph rounds is just an absolutely top-notch perk for all of the different benefits that it gives you. If it's available, I've got to recommend it. It did get a slight nerf for the range that it grants, but it's still very strong and still definitely the magazine option I would recommend. Our third column, first set of main traits here, we have stats for all, rapid hit, triple tap, well-rounded. Okay, all right. Stats for all definitely helps bolster up, kind of its lacking base state. And we have pretty much every damage perk in the game that you could think of in the final column here. There is Frenzy, Focus Fury, Golden Tricorn, One for All, Rampage, and Repulsor Brace. Now, Repulsor Brace is seeing more usage. We were talking about that a little bit at the beginning of the show. I just feel like I need the damage increase a little too much on a 180, though, to give up one of these damage perks in exchange for Repulsor Brace. I think that if Repulsor Brace had shown up in column 3 here, then that would have drastically changed my impression of the newer version of this weapon. Golden Tricorn, still very strong. One for All, very strong. This weapon has a pretty high magazine. It's not super hard to hit, a few different targets in a row. Frenzy, gives this plus 50 to reload and handling, which is absolutely fantastic. Rampage also did just get a buff, even though it's not quite as strong as some of the other damage options. It did get a buff recently with the Rampage spec being folded in. I'm probably going for range or handling on my masterwork, depending on where the rest of my traits landed. On my random rolls, probably range on my crafted one if I could pick. And then whenever we look at our rolls here, well-rounded Golden Tricorn is a pretty natural pairing. Stats for all in One for All, the Sofa roll is going to be great. That 35% damage increase is going to help this feel a lot better, just as a weapon that's not dealing a ton of damage off the bat. And then 50% from Golden Tricorn, if you're able to stack that up, is even better, right? Which there's a couple classes that I think can capitalize on that pretty well. We'll talk about that later on in the season, I'm sure. And then finally, stats for all and like a repulsor brace, if you're really looking to lean into that utility. I think that my only problem with that, again, is that it's in the wrong column for capitalizing on a weapon that needs a damage perk. And yeah, it just needs a little more, honestly. I think that the next weapon we're going to talk about is slightly better, though. So that's good. Impetus, what can you tell us about this?
You know what doesn't need anything else more? Let me tell you.
Is this where we talk about Brigand's Law? This
is where we talk about my favorite sidearm in the game, Brigand's Law, and how it has been completely overpowered by an ARC SMG, as I predicted at the start of last season. I'm, of course, talking about the IKELOS SMG with Volt Shot. That's going to be... We could just stop right there and move on to the next weapon. That's really all we need to talk about. Yeah, all right. This is an ARC aggressive frame SMG. That is going to be your high damage, high recoil. It is a stat monster. It has no competition. Also because there are no currently obtainable ARC aggressive frames other than this one. We do have, of course, Out of Bounds. That is the 900 RPM SMG that is dropping from the Crucible. That came out last season. And then there is the World Drop from Season of the Splicer Stochastic Variable, which I'm not even going to get into. So Out of Bounds, of course, did have that demo Golden Tricorn roll, which is very potent for ARC grenade builds, and I still think it is. However, for just general play, if you need an ARC SMG, or if you're playing on all three classes and you just want to take advantage of Volt Shot, IKELOS SMG is going to be the best bet here. So let's get into the barrels and mags here. I think for, again, controller players, SMGs, decide what stability you need to make it work. If you need to go polygonal, if you need to go fluted to get a little bit more, definitely do that. As an M&K player myself, I'm going to go to full bore. I'm going to commit all the way, get as much range as possible here. I am going with Seraph rounds in my magazine option. You do have TAC mag if you want a few more bullets. You're going to get through those pretty quickly here on the SMG, so that's your call. And then, of course, when we get into column 3, we have Threat Detector. That was, I think, kind of the classic combo. The last time we got IKELOS back with random rolls all the way back on Season of Arrivals, it was Threat Detector Surrounded or Threat Detector Demo was really the god rolls back then. Demo is no longer on here, but we still have Surrounded. Again, this is craftable. You can get access to Enhanced Surrounded. That could be a really great ad clear machine if Volt Shot wasn't also in column 4. So threat detectors here, but we do have a new reload perk as well. Feeding Frenzy has arrived, and I think that's a much better pairing with Volt Shot with the kind of amount of ad clear you're going to be able to do on an arc subclass when you fully spec into Jolting. Volt Shot is here. It is incredibly strong. This is probably going to be one of the best ad clear primaries in the game. I really cannot stress that enough. If you have the chance, please, please, please craft this before the season is over. Feeding Frenzy, Volt Shot, Seraph rounds. You could definitely, I don't want to forget my controller players. We do have dynamic sway reduction in column 3 if you do need a little bit more help than what the barrels and mags can get you. So that's also an option. But if you're able to control it, I think Feeding Frenzy, Threat Detector, and then Volt Shot is going to be the pairing, the god roll here, and this will be your workhorse weapon. You can easily put several thousand kills on, and it will serve you well. So very excited to have this SMG back in the game. Very excited to have Volt Shot on it. It is just as much fun as it sounds. I did get a random roll with Feeding Frenzy, Volt Shot, and I've been going to town with it. So that is the one build I'm going to recommend. It is the best build I can recommend, and I cannot recommend it enough. Court, what can you tell us about our next IKELOS weapon?
Yeah, this is the sniper rifle. It is the solar rapid fire frame. That's 140 RPM. The frame bonus here is deeper ammo reserves. Slightly faster reload when magazine is empty, and that is a 20% reload scaler. Comparing to its archetype peers, pretty old ones here. So we're comparing with Garden of Salvation's Omniscient Eye and the Dreaming City Twilight Oath. Pretty old ones. Omni and Twilight are not craftable, and they do have pretty limited or old perk pools. I know Omni still got that 4x4. Twilight did get a perk pool refresh back in Splicer, way back in Season 14. So we are comparing it with quite older weapons here. In terms of the stats, though, we have 30 range, which is kind of middle. Omni's at 37. It has the best, or the highest stability, which is 39. 67 handling, which places it in the middle. Omni's at 70. 57 reload, which is joint second. Twilight's actually at 58. It's got the highest aim assist at 73. 45 zoom, which is the highest, but Twilight does have the lowest at 35. And 57 recoil direction, which places it again in the middle. Twilight's at 59. So kind of interesting perks there. I think it's more, interesting stats there. It's more down to the perks and the barrels and magazines that you want to place on this thing. In terms of barrels, I think we'll be cranking out the stability. For one of the builds here, I'm going to harp back to an old discussion point I made back in Season 16. So we do have Arrowhead Break for that plus 30 recoil direction and the plus 10 handling, Corkscrew for the plus 5 to stab, range and handling, and Fluted for the plus 5 to stability and handling. It's really a toss-up between Corkscrew or Fluted for that stability jump. For the magazine, you can go for Seraph rounds if you want. That is plus 3 range and plus 7 stability. Accurized rounds for that plus 10 range, or Appended for the mag increase, which will be pairing with Overflow and Focused Fury. In terms of the perks, not a lot going on here. This may be more of at least I'm looking at the perks here, maybe more of a PvP weapon. But for PvE, 4 times the charm is here. I haven't seen that for a while. We have Overflow. For column 4, the only one I'm going to personally recommend would be Focused Fury. I know Incandescent is here, but it's not. I don't really see much value having Incandescent on a sniper. If you can make it work for your builds and that synergy in your solar subclass, then go for it. Alternatively, box breathing does have that kind of high burst potential, burst in quotations here. You only really get a lot that burst in one shot, and you have to wait around for a little bit. But for me personally, I'm going down the Focus Fury route. For the mass work, again, it's really up to you if you want to go for range or if you want to bump the stability up again by plus 10. And for the weapon mods, you want to go for either major spec against champions or mini bosses, or boss spec against bosses. Wildcard here, which I've talked about before. I haven't actually done any testing here, but you could go back up mag. I'm not entirely sure how that interacts with a rapid fire sniper frame, though. We have done a lot of testing with adaptive frames, which comes quite nicely into the recommended builds I'll talk about. Just a real quick kind of go-to choice would be fourth times the charm plus focused fury. That's your kind of classic combo. Alternatively, you can go down the route that I was alluding to earlier on there, and that is thoughtless but solar. So this is way back in season 16. I was talking about the stasis adaptive sniper, which is thoughtless with enhanced overflow and enhanced focus fury. That's a great sustained damage potential. Pair with appended mag and backup mag. Otherwise, you want to stick to spec mods. Again, I haven't done much testing, if any testing, with how backup mag interacts with rapid fire frames. I think there is a cap in terms of base magazine, but otherwise, spec mods will be your best friend here. And either corkscrew or fluted, and then you want to go for that stability masterwork. So you will be putting a lot of damage down range. We've talked about how overflow and focus fury interact with each other. Again, focus fury only goes by the base magazine. If you're intending it to, so let's say it's got a base magazine of 7, rounds down to 3.5, which gets halved down to 3.5, rounds up to 4. So you need to get those 3 shots in, and by that point, if you pick up more ammo drops to get the increased magazine. Sorry, I'm thinking of another perk. No, it is overflow. Picking up special or heavy ammo automatically overflows this weapon up to its regular capacity. Again, that it does. Focus Fury doesn't work off by that count. It just works off the base magazine. So, again, I've talked about this at length twice in previous episodes, way back in season 16. So, if you want more information on that, and it's also somewhere on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server, somewhere around the science chat. But like I said, some interesting combination here. Do want to try out that specific synergy with enhanced overflow and focus fury, and we'll see how that works on the IKELOS sniper rifle. All right, Saint, you are onto our final weapon here. What can you talk about?
Yep, last one we have is the IKELOS shotgun. Well, first of all, I'll say I remember using that sniper rifle against like Argos way back in the day when that was the damage meta. So good to see this thing come back, maybe even be in the meta, you know? The shotgun was also a very dominant weapon in its day. The frame, or I should say this is a solar rapid fire frame shotgun, 140 RPM, and the frame bonus is, it's full auto, has a little bit deeper ammo reserves, and just faster reload with a 0.8 reload scaler, which got buffed a little bit in the most recent season. When we look at its archetype peers, there's not really any other solar rapid fires that we could compare it to, but there are a few other weapons with similar roles or access to similar roles that we'll see. Mindbender's Without Remorse, which Mindbender's aggressive, Without Remorse, lightweight. Compass Rose is a precision, and they are all solar, and they have access to similar perks, a little bit different. And there are a couple new things here that we'll see for the first time on a shotgun in this specific shotgun. So it has some other solar shotguns out there with similar roles, decent stats, and a couple unique things to offer. We're looking at our barrels and mags, probably going full choke, maybe small bore, depending on what the situation is, an attack or appended mag for a rapid fire. We want to pump that magazine size up. Whenever we look at our main traits to see what's setting us apart here, we have Threat Detector, Pugilist, and Grave Robber all in column 3, and then Incandescent, Surrounded, Swashbuckler, Cascade Point, 1-2 Punch, and Trench Barrel in column 4. They just absolutely stacked it up here. Cascade Point being one that is showing up for the very first time on a shotgun, and then I believe this is keep in mind that we also got a buff to Surrounded with the way that the Surrounded spec mod is working, so that is stronger than ever, especially considering that you could craft this weapon. I believe that's getting up to like 45% around there if you have enhanced Surrounded on your weapon. So very, very strong perk, especially for a shotgun like this. When it comes to the masterwork, it's a bit of personal preference. I would recommend investing hugely into range just because this is a weapon that has a very compressed range band, meaning that if I get a plus 10, as opposed to like the hand cannon that we were talking about a minute ago is giving like 1.2 or 1.3 meters, plus 10 range on your IKELOS shotgun is only giving you about a third of a meter in effective range in game. So I would recommend avoiding investing heavily into range. Reload handling, anything like that is going to be good. Probably a major spec mod if I'm going to be wanting to burst things down with this. And then what I'm going to use specifically to burst things down with this are, kind of something new build. We got the threat detector with Cascade Point. Cascade Point is acting super strangely, and as far as I have heard from the various damage testers in our community, I'm pretty sure I heard at one point Rock DC say that whenever Cascade Point was active, it was alternating in between, 240 RPM or like 225 RPM. So it was around like 230 RPM average, which is like a 65-ish, 66% buff if you want to average that out. So a lot of funky stuff going on there. Not exactly sure, but I mean, if we're looking at this in terms of DPS, 142 to 230 something RPM is by all means effectively a 60% increase in your DPS. So I think this is something that if you set it up right, you get a final blow and you swap to it, could be really strong, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out in practicality. I have to spend a little bit more time playing with Cascade Point versus something like Surrounded or even, we were looking at Incandescent, Swashbuckler, right? 1-2 Punch, Trench Barrel, all good options. Trench Barrel kind of shell of its former self, its original glory, when it first debuted on this weapon, actually, in Season 3. This thing was an absolute monster. But yeah, maybe not quite as good as it once was. If you want to have some fun, you've got Subsistence and Incandescent. It's not meta, but I mean, you can just chew through a room of ads and see them explode, and that's kind of nice. And then lastly, for a damage dealer, it's got to be Threat Detector and Surrounded, or maybe Trench Barrel, depending on what you're trying to take down. There's not a lot of room for rapid fire shotguns these days in the meta or in the encounters that we face. The only time I ever use anything like this is maybe I'm killing a knight to seal the brand at War Priest or something like that. There's just not a lot of scenarios, but I'm definitely going to be looking for a Cascade Point roll on this just to try that out and see how effective it is. Any closing thoughts on our refreshed IKELOS V1.03 set?
Good changes. Really good changes.
Yeah. All jokes aside, I think the IKELOS SMG is definitely the highlight here. Feels really good. I think in terms of community sentiment, I think this is where the comment of why weren't Warmind cells buffed on top of these weapons, I suppose. Well, that's dealt by a different part of Bungie. It's not the weapons team exclusively, anyway. It's not the weapons team that deal with Warmind cells. But it would have been nice to have a little bit of a kind of slight buff to the Warmind cells just on top of these weapons coming out. But I'm okay with just the refreshed perk pool.
Yeah, I mean, if Warmind cells do come back, we'll have the best versions of these weapons to play with them. So
absolutely.
I'll just wait and see. All right. Well, it's a nice short episode for you guys there. Definitely went a little bit longer than we were hoping, but that does conclude episode 44 and our first year of Podcast versus Enemies. We'll save the sentiments for next episode when we can officially look back on a full year. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Whether this is your first episode or your 44th episode or somewhere in between, thank you. We really do appreciate it. We also want to thank our audio engineer, Mr. Sutton, for his work and support and having to listen to us say it won't be a 2-hour episode, we promise, and lying to him week after week. So thank you, Mr. Sutton, for sticking around for these 44 episodes. Please continue to stick around. We don't know what we'd do without you. We will see you guys in the first few weeks of January, where we'll talk about the Spire of the Watcher dungeon and the Deepstone Crypt raid weapons and their improved loot pools. So until then, have a happy holiday and be well. My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and in Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter. Court, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter as Court Projects, on Discord as Court, and you can find my documentation over on the Massive Breakdowns website, along with other top-tier spreadsheets, documentation over there on the website. And yes, wish everyone that listening to the episode and the episodes before a very happy holiday, a very happy new year. And Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, my name is Saint Kabir. You can find me by that name or Saint_Kabir on Twitter, YouTube, and Hive. And for now, I'll be baking some cookies. Thank you for listening in to episode 44.